What's up, y'all? Will here with Schedulefly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, brought to you by us here at Schedulefly. Simple restaurant employee scheduling software, legendary customer service. Y'all, if you're on pencil and paper or Excel, we can make life easier. We don't have a sales team. We've grown by word of mouth to close to 6,000 restaurants over the 17 years we've been doing this, but if my only pitch is if you're on pencil and paper or Excel, or you're on an expensive, cumbersome employee scheduling software that has terrible customer support, they're out there. We can make life easier, and we'll take great care of you. So go to schedulefly.com, 30-day free trial, and no setup fee, no contract, no hassle, no friction, no nothing, no other fees. And we haven't raised our prices since 2007, believe it or not. So also, this podcast is brought to you by two phenomenal companies, Pop Menu and Kickfin, and you'll hear more from each of them or about each of them momentarily. Let me first talk about Shawn Stokes. Shawn has been on this podcast. This is we were talking about his third, maybe his fourth time on here. I've always enjoyed talking to Shawn, and frankly, it's been too long. So very glad to have him back on the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast. He is a very, very cerebral, thoughtful, kind, good dude who runs great businesses. He has two restaurants, or a restaurant with two locations, and then a couple of bars that are both in the same building, all in sort of the Research Triangle Park. Three of his places are in Durham. One's over in just outside of Chapel Hill in Carrboro, North Carolina. And he has just so many thoughtful things to say every time we speak. Very engaging, very kind, good dude. And we did this interview. He was in his car waiting to pick his kid up from camp. And there are a couple of short episodes, and I emphasize that because I don't want you to bail. There's a couple of times where the signal got a little fuzzy. So stay with it, because you're not going to miss any of the message, and it's good content. It's great content. Shawn Stokes, folks, you will enjoy this episode. Before we talk to Shawn, let's hear from our awesome sponsor and partner at Schedulefly, Pop Menu. Pop Menu is, well, they're a partner of Schedulefly, and we have a lot of happy mutual customers. But Pop Menu is all about making your day easier and your sales bigger. They will simplify your marketing operations, bring in more guests, capture customer data for personalized remarketing to keep them coming back. With one super simple to use platform that integrates with most point of sales like Toast and Square and a number of others, Pop Menu starts with a beautifully designed, easy to update interactive menu that transforms the guest experience online. It includes a brand new website that's optimized for search engines like Google for no additional cost, automated digital marketing, online ordering and waitlisting, and you'll never miss another call with their AI answering solution that costs as little as 47 cents an hour. Check it out. Check out the link in our show notes. There's so much more in Pop Menu. Here's my 2 cents. I've talked to a lot of our mutual customers, and here's what they say about Pop Menu. Great company, great customer service, great product, great results. Check out Pop Menu and check out this episode of Restaurant Owners Uncorked. Thank you all for listening. See ya. Hey everybody, I'm here with Shawn Stokes. He's in his car picking up his kid from camp, but taking time to do a podcast today. So Shawn, thank you, man. Just introduce yourself real quick.
Hey, Will. Yeah, no, it's good to be chatting with you again. My name is Shawn Stokes. I own a couple restaurants and a couple bars in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina. Got a couple restaurants called Luna Rotisserie, one located in Durham and one located in Carrboro. And I've got two bars located in downtown Durham, one called Remedy Room and the other called Ruby's on 5 Points.
And
the bars.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say the bars are the newest edition. They're running at about a year and a half old at this point.
Yeah, I want to revisit that story we were talking about before we started recording here, because I think that's a cool story. But you've been on the podcast multiple times. I think twice,
at
right?
least two. Yeah, at least two, I think. during the pandemic, probably, maybe even before that.
No, you were on before. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I was there at your place that time. I'm trying to remember when that was because I came to Luna and then Seth Gross came over there.
That's right.
After we were done recording. That was our first time we met and all that. But well, okay. I want to tell that story about the bars because I thought that was really interesting, and I want to ask you a few things about that. But let me ask you this, because we're doing this on this screen, and I'm looking at my screen. I see I have my Giving Kitchen hat on, and are you familiar with Giving Kitchen?
I'm not.
Good. Now I get an opportunity to tell you about it, and to tell. So, Giving Kitchen they're out of Atlanta, and they provide assistance to food service workers in crisis. A lot of times that might be financial assistance, or maybe it's connecting them with the right mental health assistance. They've been doing this for 10 years. They've raised, like, I think their next miles, there's somewhere between $9 and $10 million in total dollars raised. It's not nonprofit. And they've had, I think, 13,000 and change cases submitted. So, like, let's say you're a cook and you get injured and you can't work for a month, and you got you're about to get evicted or something, just the stuff that happens all the time, or you can't pay your gas bill, whatever it is, you submit a case, and then they will, agree to an amount based on what you've requested to help you. And so all these funds are going in. And so they've had over 13,000 cases. 25% of those have been within the last year. So, I mean, it's really ramping up. Been out of Atlanta. So they're very well known down there by the whole hospitality scene, but they have a person in Charlotte now and a person in Nashville. And they want to be everywhere. And so the reason I'm talking about this is I'm so fired up about it. I just had the founder, Jen, on the podcast. I haven't posted the episode yet, but I was down in Atlanta about a week and a half ago and sat down with her, got their story, amazing story. So you'll have to listen to the episode to hear the whole story, but
I will. Yeah.
I wear this hat a lot now. They gave me these. I got a big stack of cards that it's kind of cool because it's in Spanish and English. And so, like, when I go, like, when my family go to a restaurant or whatever, I just hand them a card. I'm like, hey, about Giving Kitchen? Of course, everybody says no around here so far. So that's good, because that's an opportunity, So, a lot of times I know, like, y'all might have, as an owner, you may have somebody coming to you going, look, man, I can't pay my water bill, whatever it is. Like, that's the perfect place. And they're really good at it, and they're very sincere about what they do, and they're freaking awesome. So I'm like so high on it. So I just like to tell people about it.
Excellent. Well, thanks for bringing them to my attention. I'll look into it for sure.
Yeah, spread the word around Durham. If people in that community need assistance there, it's a really awesome organization. And okay, changing gears. So November 2020, if I remember correctly, is that what you were saying? You were approached about potentially buying a building. And just rehash that story that you were telling me before, because I think this is a cool.
Yeah, well, and we'll all remember back that November 2020 was a pretty dark time.
Yeah.
This was like pre-vaccines. Trump was still, I believe he was still he was still in the White House. I can't remember if this was before or after the election, but nevertheless, very different times than we're in right now. And I was actually aware of this building being for sale because my landlord was being not exactly helpful, to put it lightly, and had found some sort of clause in our lease to try and get me evicted. So I was looking for another home for our restaurant, and I've been looking at real estate, and I'd seen this building come up, but it was, it wasn't the right fit anyway. It was a second generation bar and one of my favorite bars in the area. In any case, one of my buddies reached out to me. He's a real estate broker here in town, and asked me if I had any interest in the building. And I said, well, yeah, of course. It's beautiful. It's one of my favorite bars in town. Has been since I moved here in 2009. But I don't, have the means to buy this, especially now, given everything's going on right now, and with so much uncertainty in the world. And he said, well, these friends of mine really want to buy, but they don't know the first thing about running a bar, and they can get a lot better terms if they have an owner operator on the holding company that buys the building. Would you be interested in being 20% owner of the building, and then you can have free reign to do whatever you want to do? And most people would agree that November 2020 was about the dumbest time in the world to decide to open a bar, because the bars weren't even open, at least here in North Carolina. Like, you couldn't even go into a bar at that point. I think restaurants were only allowed to have like 50% capacity at that point. But it was just, too much of an opportunity to pass up on. And, I was pretty optimistic that the vaccines were kind of rolling along and we were going to have them by, January or February, and that hopefully things will be opening up by May of 2021. And so anyway, we pushed forward with it. And there's a lot of other stories that are kind of tucked into that one. But the long story short is that, we bought the building. There's now 2 bars that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast located in it. One's right on top of the other, and they're different but complementary. They definitely have different clientele, and that was the idea. We wanted to kind of create 2 personalities, but there are some synergies that are kind of created between the 2.
So you've got the 2 Luna rotisserie locations. So you got the fully established restaurants going on. Now you've got a little bit of a hedge, diversifying your client base. You've got bars. You've got you're part owner of the real estate. So sounds like I'm sure at the time you're probably some nights going, what am I thinking? Like, but good for you. If you got ownership in a building in downtown Durham, commercial real estate, and you want to hold that alone for a long time, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it was everything's a risk in life, but it just seemed like this one was one that was worth taking. And within, I think, a year after we signed the papers on it, a large developer broke ground on a 27-story high rise going right across the street from it. So that's under construction right now. It'll be another 18 to 24 months before it's completed. But, that whole part of town is starting to fill in even more. So we'll see how it shakes out. 27.
Right across the street?
Yeah, right across the street. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I would think people that are living in a 27-story building and probably a large swath of those are going to want to be able to walk across the street to a couple of bars at night. That's awesome, man.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope they're thirsty.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, so tell me, man, I mean, gosh, it has been a while since we talked. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you were having some issues with the landlord there. Did you guys, you didn't get moved, did you? You're still there for Luna?
No, we sorted it out. We sorted it out. It was ugly and painful. And I don't wish anyone ever have to go through something like that. Especially because, anyone who's an operator listening to this podcast knows just how much goes into building out a space. And, it's one of those things where the way of the world is such that if you're a tenant, you're just investing all that money into the landlord's asset. It definitely gives a disproportionate amount of power to the landlord, which is why I've now committed to never being a tenant again. I just won't. I don't like to ever say never, but I'm going to try really hard not to do that again. But yeah, I didn't want to try and find a new space and have to invest another, $250,000 or more into it. So we did everything we could to kind of work it out, and it involved a lot of attorneys and things like that. But I'm glad it's behind us for sure.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's those are these, sort of unplanned for, potentially catastrophic events. You're already going through that with COVID, unplanned for, potentially catastrophic. And then you got this, what happened? So you got a landlord that's looking at your lease and trying to find a clause that enables them to move you aside. Like, why? Y'all had been there a long time and you have a great business.
Yeah. I don't know how much I should, expand on it, given that I still want to maintain a relationship with her. And to be honest, like to this day, I still have no idea why,
Okay.
or what was behind, what was behind it. Cause it doesn't make sense. You know, I think at that point I'd been in business for over 6 years, never missed a rent payment. Um, she wasn't my original landlord. She bought the building afterwards. I guess that would be like another word of advice is something I never ever considered was, you can interview a landlord, as a potential tenant and kind of vet them as being a good person of integrity and whatnot. But there's nothing that can stop them from a year or two later selling it to someone who's completely outside of your control, right? You don't get any say in that matter, So it's just, I don't know, it kind of blindsided me when they sold this building, and I wound up with someone entirely different than who I thought that I was agreeing to with a long-term relationship. And it's just one other reason why moving forward, I'll do everything I can if I ever do any more businesses to try and also make it a real estate play as opposed to being, a tenant and sort of beholden to someone else's decisions.
Great piece of advice. It's very practical and replicatable. You have a landlord who potentially is courting you, who is fantastic. You work out a great deal. But you just have to ask that question to yourself and to your attorney, probably, what happens if this building gets sold in 2 years and we have a 15-year lease or a 10-year lease or whatever? And then what are the things that could come back and bite us if it's a totally different type of landlord? That's interesting. Well, I'm glad it worked out. I'm glad you're still there. It sounds like a painful process. So congrats on getting that all sorted out.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the importance of an ironclad lease and making sure you have a few different attorneys look it over, or at least one that you definitely trust, because that's ultimately what's going to be your protection. It was what kept me in the space. Although I still had to drop about $5,000 with my attorney to show my landlord that she was reading it wrong. But nevertheless, if there's one hedge against it, it's making sure that the lease has all the safeguards in it to protect you as many as it can, in that relationship.
Well, good. Certainly a good strategy to try to make sure real estate's involved going forward. Hard to pull that off. A lot of times.
Yeah, because I mean, like, not everyone has the means to go ahead and buy a building for their first place by any means. I certainly didn't, and that's this property was my first business, and and there's also a lot to be. It's not all downside, right? Like, there's a lot of landlords that offer a lot of tenant improvement allowance that helps someone on their first business do the build out. So I don't know. I guess it's easy for me at this point in my career now to say, yeah, like, don't do that or try to avoid doing that. But at the same time, for most people, there's not another option. But I guess you just got to go into it knowing all the potential downsides as well.
Just understand them all. Have a good attorney. Like, I think good advice to have maybe more than one. Even look at it's an investment to get that right. That's for sure. So, are you involved with or do you follow the IRC, Independent Restaurant Coalition?
I do. Actually, I just watched a news clip today with Chidi Kumar.
That's why I'm
preaching today. That was good.
So I saw that last night, and I thought she did a good job. And I texted her to tell her that, and then I said, "Would you or somebody on the staff at the IRC like to come on the podcast?" And she said, "Absolutely." And she was going to talk to their executive director, and either or both maybe might come on. Chidi talked about the ongoing challenge, particularly of independent restaurants. One of the things she talked about is to find a price point where you can actually still have any margins, because food costs have gone up and labor has gone up, and a lot of independent restaurants buy from local purveyors, don't have don't have economies of scale, don't have the ability to negotiate prices with providers and so forth. And, you wind up with a customer saying, I think she was talking about, like, why am I going to eat your $28 plate of, pasta when I can make pasta at home for $8 or whatever.
Right.
And it certainly is an ongoing challenge given the inflation that we've seen across the board in every part of the economy, just about, and restaurants touch every part of the economy. So I'm curious, having watched what she said, what your thoughts were, and do you share the same sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I always have. I've always found it, because I mean, my background. For the listeners, I can kind of give a quick recap, but since the day that I opened this restaurant, Luna, I committed to running a restaurant very different from all the many restaurants that I kind of came up in during the late '90s and early aughts. And by that I just meant, like, I was going to use source sustainable products. I was going to pay living wages. I was going to offer work-life balance to my staff. I was going to try and create um, you know a much more hospitable and sustainable environment. And if I couldn't do that, I wasn't going to open. I wasn't going to do it. And so I've oftentimes lamented. I think one of our very first reviews from the local rag here, the Indie Week, which was just chock full of these progressive journalists, and love them to death. But I think they get a little confused at times. And the very, very first review was, yeah, so I had lunch and it was delicious, and they were just gushing over everything. And they had an appetizer, they had a main course, they had one of our specialty iced teas, and a dessert for lunch. Nice lunch. And then at the very end of it says, but it's unfortunate that we have yet another establishment in downtown Durham that's not affordable. It cost me $25 with tip to have lunch. I wrote her after the fact and said, well, if you I know for a fact from reading your publication that most of your journalistic team advocates for sourcing local sustainable goods, paying living wages, using compostable to-go materials as opposed to styrofoam, and on and on and on and on. If you want all those things cost more money. And if you want a McDonald's price, well, then you're going to get McDonald's product and McDonald's externalities. And I've oftentimes also just felt, in terms of like the labor aspect goes, that people oftentimes are more focused or concerned on the origins and the quality of the chicken and how it was raised than the person cooking it, and that there isn't nearly as much concern, or at least there wasn't, pre-COVID. It may have changed a little bit, but I think that's a lot of that's become just sort of lip service. Concern for the how well the cooks are paid, how well the staff's paid. And a lot of people, just can't connect the dots to say, like, hey, if I raise my wages by 20%, well, guess what? I got to raise the prices by 20%, or thereabouts. And I think there's a lot of, obviously I have a lot of thoughts on this, Will.
Please, I love this. I think this is so important.
Well, I think, so where I live, it's a highly educated, very progressive, city. It's a small city, Durham is. But I think, maybe like 85% of the population here, citizens, are registered Democrat. And what I'm getting at is that they read publications like the New York Times and the Washington Post. And there seems to be a narrative in these publications that, I think there's an article the other day in the New York Times that said, businesses keep raising their prices, making the Fed's job to stop inflation difficult. And it's like, well, it's kind of getting it backwards, right? I mean, like inflation happens as a result of, well, it's very complicated, obviously, but the reality is that you know everyone advocated for paying essential workers more, and our government did a lot of things to empower uh, essential workers and people who had worked in restaurants, and it gave them a bit more of a bargaining chip when it came to hiring, and so as a result, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but I think most people are now paying 20 to 30% more per for their hourly employees than prior to the pandemic. And I know that like all my goods, all my food has gone up in price, right? Flour, butter, eggs, all my meats, everything's gone up by anywhere between 20 and 40%. All of my services have gone up. The guy that the company that comes to clean my grease trap once a month, it's now more expensive because they've had to pay their people more money. And so I could opt not to raise my prices, but then within short order, I'd be one less restaurant in the landscape. And so we have to raise our prices. We're not all, greedy, mustache twirling exploiters of the economy. We're just doing everything we can to try and stay afloat. And that yes, that means raising our prices. And you know what? Every time I do it, it's not like I'm saying, oh, everyone's reading about inflation and the headlines, that means I can raise my prices. No, I'm doing it with much trepidation. I'm concerned every time I do a 50 cent or a 25% increase on something, is that going to be the one that pushes people away? Is that going to be the one that, reaches diminishing returns and I start losing business instead of bringing in the much needed revenue that I need? So I don't know. I mean, it's great for people like Elizabeth Warren to have her talking points and her rhetoric, but it's not true. And it does a lot of us a disservice, a lot of us independent restaurants, at least. And I think just mostly small businesses in general, I think it's a disservice to them. We're not all, it's like there needs to be a completely separate category of business from those that are not, publicly owned corporations with shareholders. We're just, there's entirely different things.
Amen. Gosh, first, you would hope that going back to your comment about the first review you got, I would hope that a publication like that would say it was $25. Here's why, and educate consumer about the difference between going to a restaurant like yours and what you're doing for your employees, where you're sourcing, your raw materials from. That's a great opportunity to educate the public versus complaining about, which I'm sure was the essence of your message back to that person, but that's very frustrating. And I think Chidi was making the same point last night. Mm-hmm. And that was on Bloomberg, so hopefully that gets a lot of views, but there's a public education piece of this for sure. And yes, I do think people want to support small businesses and the people that work there. And it's easy to, they want to say that they do, but you really do need to understand there is a massive, massive difference when you've got 1,000 locations or 5,000 and 10,000, what and where you can buy your products from, the negotiation power you have, and frankly, probably how you treat your staff. I mean, employees want to work at places like yours where they're respected and treated well and paid fairly. And so I'm glad that I guess my coming back full circle, I'm not surprised that you're paying attention to the IRC, and I'm looking very, very forward to sharing their story and what they're doing, because there is a lot of education that needs to continue. And yes, people kind of panicked during COVID because their favorite restaurants were closed down and they didn't want to see them closed forever, and they rallied behind that. But here we are now, and a lot of that's, people have gone back to where we may have been before.
All right, y'all. Time for a little mid-episode break to talk about Kickfin, our mid-episode sponsor and a great business. Thousands of restaurants, bars, and breweries use Kickfin to tip out their employees instantly, no cash required. With Kickfin, tips go directly to your employer's bank of choice the second their shift ends. It's a really simple solution to a really big problem, because if you're still paying out credit card tips in cash, it's costing you. Time-consuming bank runs and cash counting take managers away from work that matters. Cash is hard to track, which leads to accounting headaches, and it creates the perfect opportunity for theft, human error, and compliance issues. Bottom line, there's never been an instant, secure way to pay out tips until Kickfin. It's an easy-to-use software that sends real-time cashless tip payouts straight to your employees' bank accounts 24/7, 365. Kickfin gives managers hours back in their day, makes reporting a breeze, and protects your business from risk. Most importantly, employees love it. Restaurants can have Kickfin up and running overnight. Employees can enroll in seconds. No hardware, no contracts, no setup fees. Visit kickfin.com for a personalized demo and see how restaurants across the country are digitizing tips with Kickfin. That's what they like me to read. I will tell you this. I know the folks at Kickfin. Check out the episode with Brian Hassan, the co-CEO of Kickfin, was on here on the podcast. Great people, love what they do. They treat their customers well. We have mutual customers that love the product and love the way they, the relationship they have with Kickfin. So check it out, link in the show notes, and let's check out the rest of this episode.
A weird time because COVID was so weird, and then there's PPP money, and there's the restaurant restoration fund, all that, and we're seeing. I mean, I feel like, and I don't have the data. We're small, and we don't really manage all this stuff or carefully critique it. But it seems to be that I'm seeing more places closed now than I have, prior to the years prior to COVID.
Yeah, I think. I think for what we're concerned about here, we're sort of still in COVID in a weird way. Things are still, the echoes of it are still taking place, but just in different ways. And I guess I'll preempt this by saying that, everyone's situation is going to be unique. It used to be, everyone's heard the phrase location, location, location. COVID taught me and continues to teach me that there's another mantra or rule that we should pay attention to anyway, and that's geography, geography, geography.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, there's a book. Did you read a book called The Big Sort by Bill Bishop?
I've heard of that. I've not read it.
Came out a while ago. The premise is that, that starting probably 10, 15 years ago, there's just been this trend and this increasing of people kind of moving themselves geographically according to their political or ideological tribes, right? And so you're finding that bluer states and cities are getting bluer and redder ones redder, and we're kind of just moving into our own echo chambers. And so what that means is, it means a lot. What it means is that there's a continuum between those two extremes, obviously, but different things are going to play out differently in different geographies. And so the pandemic was a great example, right? Let's say in Durham, people just were incredibly risk averse and were not going out. Even once they opened up restaurants to insert in dine-in service, we didn't really see much of an uptick. But meanwhile, I have friends that have restaurants in Tallahassee, Florida, and their sales in 2020 and 2021 were larger than 2019. They almost didn't have any effect on their business whatsoever. Yeah. And that's largely due to just, I think that, the type of people and the political leanings of the people within that geography and the news that they consume and how it shapes their worldview, so on and so forth. So in any case, another and eventually I'll kind of get to the point of what I'm noticing here in our area is another, I guess, way you could describe our area is that it's highly educated. Almost half the population has a bachelor's degree compared to less than 30% on average in America. More than 20% has a graduate degree, and what that means is that a lot of people had the ability and continue to have the ability to work remotely. Offices have not come back in our area. But one thing really struck me this year, as soon as schools got out for summer vacation, it always kind of slowed down here in the summer, but weekends, Fridays and Saturdays, revenues dropped below those of like weekdays for the first time ever. So normally, your weekdays are busy, or somewhat busy, hopefully, but your weekends, your Fridays and Saturdays, that's when you're going to be the busiest. You're going to bring in the most revenue. In fact, we probably brought in 40% of our weekly revenue on those 2 days, and we staffed accordingly, of course, right? We put more cooks in, we put more servers on. So for those days to suddenly have drop sales revenues below weekday sales was shocking, to say the least, and it kind of blindsided us. And so I was like, well, maybe it was the weather or something. I don't know. Next weekend, same thing. And so I don't know what's behind this, but my theory is that, now that people who are working in office jobs are kind of know what they can and can't get away with hybrid work, remote work. They could take a 4-day trip to the beach or to the mountains and take time off from their PTO, or they could leave on Friday morning, head to the beach or the mountains, come back Monday, call it like work remotely, and not have to take any of the vacation time, and they still get to take the trip with the family over the summer while the kids are out of school. So if you're in a town that's not a tourist destination, Durham has largely relied on, business travel, things like that. If there's any kind of tourism coming here, it was mostly through business, through Duke University, through RTP, Research Triangle Park, and a lot of the industries down there. And that has also not come back. And so if you're in a place where that's not a tourist destination, then I wonder if this might be a trend that's happening in other geographies in the country. But it's not just our restaurant. I've talked to multiple other owners in the area, and they're all experiencing the same sort of thing. It's all just like another example of just like another strange dynamic that's happening as a result of all these fundamental changes, I think, that happened during COVID. And so, we're now like, we've always kind of kept good notes and journals on what's going on. But next year, we'll be going back to this and saying, okay, well, now we can maybe staff accordingly and actually have fewer cooks on Friday and Saturday, so that we're not, blowing our labor costs through the roof.
Yeah. That's pretty wild. I haven't heard that before. I haven't heard any. I mean, I just nobody's articulated that same trend. Maybe I haven't thought to ask, but it raises that question. It makes me very curious about what's happening in, like similar cities around the country.
Like in our area, I have to imagine that Asheville, Charleston, Wilmington, places like that are probably exceptionally busy on weekends now, more so than prior to the pandemic, because people can take those quick, get in the car and drive a few hour type vacations, and still technically be considered working. So yeah, it's been interesting to kind of make these observations on where you choose to plant your roots and what the impact of those decisions might be. And I'm certainly thinking about it as with any future projects we work on, where it might be. I'm looking to other areas.
I had a customer on this podcast a couple of weeks ago who grew up in Chicago, has 5 or 6 restaurant bars in Chicago, and used to vacation in Naples. Has, I think, maybe parents, grandparents, retired, family in Naples, and he moved to Naples, and he's opened his first spot there, and that's his plan forward. It is interesting, that comment from that book, because it is a weird bifurcation geographically. I had a customer I was visiting out in Boulder a few months back, and she said, I'll never live in a red state, Wow. I mean, I just don't think of things that way. I was like, there's people of both sides in every state, and I don't know. But I guess people are starting to think that way more and more. Quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means. It's, there's so much I feel like there was like almost a decade of just good economy, low rates, lots of restaurants opening, lots going on. And boy, everything has changed in the last few years.
Yeah. I mean, I broke into that long-winded story because you'd asked, you mentioned that some of the places are still struggling. And I think that a lot of the struggle is just because there's so many unforeseen things, and we're already kind of hanging by a thread after the pandemic and everything else. So if you're blindsided suddenly by something as basic and as expected as being busy on the weekends, and that not happening, that can be like the final blow to a place, yeah, I don't know. I think that will be the whole industry as a whole is, I think, at the beginnings of what's going to be a massive transformation over the next decade, at least the next 5 years. We're going to see a massive change, I think, and people are going to have to figure out how to operate things differently. I know I'm thinking about we've started doing a lot of things differently, and I continue to look for ways to do more to just strengthen us and fortify us against any unforeseen events like that moving forward. I think that's going to be the key for existing establishments to stay open, is to be able to change, evolve.
What are some ways you're changing and evolving?
Well, so, I think a lot of people over the pandemic, I don't think I was unique in this. Anytime that you have a recession, well, anytime you're in a boom cycle, businesses, I think it's natural for them to kind of accrue fat, right? You get comfortable, revenues are coming in, profits are decent. You might have a little bit of extra labor here. You're not really focusing so much on what the cost of limes are, and so you kind of let things slip, and then you have a recession, and then all of a sudden you break out the magnifying glass and you start really, really inspecting every single component aspect of your business. And I think we all did that during the pandemic for sure. And so, things like we're all having to pay more. So we used to, bring in, just for example, we used to chop all of our cabbage for our slaw by hand, and with a cleaver. And so now I bought a $1,500 Roku attachment, and now instead of it taking an hour for someone to chop the cabbage, they knock it out in 10 minutes. So just kind of weighing out, really looking closely at the labor, the cost of labor versus the cost of the goods and products. Excuse me. I in the front of the house and the back of the house, I did sort of the opposite things. In the front of the house, I'm actually like dumbing down the skill sets of the front of the house, meaning like I've gone down to one manager. As I used to have two. I used to have like a daytime front of the house manager and a nighttime manager. So I eliminated one of those and just kind of gave a little bit more responsibility to the servers and the bartender. So just trying to eliminate that, and I'm actually trying to, something maybe you and I can talk about another time, thinking of trying to build some sort of app to assist with restaurant management that might help restaurant owners widen the pool of applicants that can manage the restaurants. I think Steve Jobs said that the computer is a bicycle for the brain. I want to try and create something that's a bicycle for the restaurant manager that can kind of help automate a lot of their tasks. But that's a whole other story. The back of the house, I kind of did the opposite. I eliminated my dishwasher position entirely. So I don't have a dishwasher anymore. It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. It's kind of like the Achilles heel of the restaurant. It's the position that's most likely to not show up. And when they don't show up, it's really hard on everyone. It makes it very hard to run service. And so what we do now is the cooks just rotate through the dish pit. And the idea is that, I always noticed that there was downtime for the dishwashers, and there's always only so much cleaning they can do. And they don't have the skill set to do really much anything else. They can chop onions or something like that, do some very, very basic prep work. But if you have a cook, and I've cross-trained all my cooks to know how to do everything. So now everyone in the kitchen knows how to do everything. It's part of the program. And so if there's whenever there's that downtime in the dish pit, which inevitably it always is, then there's always something that they can do, and they all know how to do what needs to get done. So it just makes everything run more efficiently. And the other beautiful part about it is that the dish pit's always nice and neat and orderly now. It used to be that the cooks would just come back and just slam the stuff back there and, not worry about how it looked, or not worried about if things were scraped or, and now, because everyone knows that they're going to be working back there, everyone respects that station a lot more.
I hear you. Okay. These are great examples. And a lot of that will have to continue. I think, to your point, for restaurants to continue to evolve and figure out how to thrive in a very different economy and a different environment.
Yeah, there's just still so much volatility in everything. I mean, Chidi was talking about it with food costs. That a few months ago it was eggs. Well, eggs are back down, but now it's avocados, or it's there. And people, again, a lot of the political commentators that don't know the first thing about running a business, they're lamenting the fact and saying like, oh, well, businesses aren't lowering their prices. Well, yeah, no, we're not lowering our prices because we don't know what's going to increase next week. We don't want to lower and then raise them again, then lower them and raise them again. We're going to raise them until we find ourselves out of the weeds. And maybe then, we might bring it back down again if the competitive landscape warrants it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that we're all sort of still in the thick of it and trying to navigate what continues to be a lot of uncertainty. Speaking from my personal experience anyway, like I said, I can't really speak. I'm sure that everyone has a different story.
Well, to your point, I mean, I do hear just generally, depending on, I think you nailed it with geography.
Yeah.
Depending on where people are when I talk to them, that has a lot to do with what I'm hearing. So, well, I know you're about to do a camp pickup. So I'll let you roll. I will tell you that you'll be the first person I've said this to live, but starting next Wednesday, August 9th, for 2 weeks through Schedule Fly, we're going to have this opportunity via Crocs. They have a hospitality at work shoe, but this is a 20% discount for any Crocs item that you can get by going through Schedule Fly. And then the really, really cool thing is that they're going to donate, they're not making any money on this. They're going to donate 40% of the revenue to Sophie's Neighborhood, which is a not-for-profit in Boulder, started by Hosea and Lauren Rosenberg. Their daughter Sophie has a very rare but a very rare bone disease, and I think like 50 people in the world have it. And so there's not a lot of money for research and so forth. And they've started this not-for-profit 2-3 years ago when they found out about Sophie having this, and Crocs is actually headquartered in Boulder. So we were able to kind of approach them and say, look, we got all these end users, 250,000 of them. And, you've got this amazing local charity out there. Maybe we could connect, our users with your product. And if you guys want to, make a contribution. So anyway, so that's it. You get 20% off any Crocs you buy, and then 40% goes to Sophie's Neighborhood. And we launch it next Wednesday night. So we're pretty fired up about that.
Yeah, very cool. That's great.
Yeah.
And how are you going to be, how are you notifying everyone about that?
We'll do it through Schedulefly. We'll have like a pop-up in our alert center and things like that. And then we'll stick a link on the mobile, and we'll be definitely trying to make a big splash about it, because we want this to be as successful as possible, of course. So anyway, I just want to share that, because it's been about a year working on this. So we finally kind of got it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's cool.
Hoping to find other opportunities like that, Shawn, like where we, can provide things of value to our audience, and kind of bind the community together. And because you're on this platform, these are the things that, we can offer you. That's something we've been, kind of were working on that before COVID, and then laid low for the last couple of years. And now I'm kind of reviving that effort to try to find things that, hey, you work at a restaurant that use Schedulefly, hey, you can get these Crocs, or, maybe you can get, a discount on your phone service, or, just stuff like that. Just trying to find other opportunities that we can add value.
That's great, man. I'll have to stew on that a little bit. Float some ideas your way at some point.
Please do. You know how to
just
find
in terms
them.
of, yeah. There's some again down to geography, but our kitchen staff is almost exclusively Latino immigrants, and many of them Spanish speaking only, and they have a whole separate set of needs and for support and things like that than other demographics do.
Yep.
And I think that clearly this restaurant industry, we're not unique in that, but that's something that I see here a lot. It's like, wow, this group here has a whole unique set of challenges that a lot of other places I'd worked, that they don't have.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about that. I'd love to hear about that. And, and I think that's why that Giving Kitchen card is English and Spanish.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, listen, I'll let you go. Enjoy time with your kid, and I always great to talk. You're such a thoughtful dude and an intelligent and intentional guy. So I always learn a lot when I talk to you, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this, man. It's good catching up. Very good catching up.
Well, thanks. Well, that means a lot, man. It's good catching up with you too.
Absolutely. All right, Shawn. We'll talk again soon. Send some stuff my way, man. Like offline here, we'll, whatever ideas you got. Let's keep talking.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll do.
All right, man. See you.
Take care.
Hey, y'all, before you sign out on this episode, a couple of quick things. Number one, if you listen to us on iTunes, if you could give us a star rating and a comment, it would help so much. Same thing if you're on Spotify, follow us, or any platform that you're on. If you would just do whatever their rating or follow options are. What that does is it tells the algorithms that this content is good and meaningful and valuable, and it'll tell them to put it in front of more people. So thank you for doing that. If you take the second to do that, that'd be so awesome. And also, if your restaurant is either using Excel or you're using some software that's expensive and has a lot of bells and whistles you don't need, or maybe doesn't have great customer service, we'd love to take care of you at Schedulefly. Simple, easy restaurant employee scheduling software, legendary customer service, 30-day free trial, schedulefly.com. My cell phone number's on the trial sign-up page. Thank you for listening. See ya.